All right, we are back this time with democracy. What is it good for? But I'm starting with the Alabama legislature has passed a bill banning medical care for transgender youth and apparently forcing them to stop and reverse transitions in progress. At least that's what some reports say, which is really harsh, supposedly the harshest one in America. And yet the Kentucky governor stopped the bill trying to do the same to ban transgender women from women's sports there, transgender students from women's sports. And this is the third or fourth Republican governor that's done this. And it reminds me very much of Trump's insurrection in 2020. There is this wing of the Republican Party, which Charlie Sykes kindly calls the entertainment wing, and other political theorists have called the paranoid style in American politics, that goes back to Joseph McCarthy and probably further, which is there are certain politicians that raise scary specters of things that aren't there, like the caravan of immigrants or the gay people taking over your schools or communists everywhere. And they try to get a lot of support by scaring people with this scary emotional argument that doesn't actually make any sense. And they are not serious legislators planning to pass any programs that make any sense. They're just getting support by creating an angry mob to charge after them. And Trump is sort of the king of this, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'd say, is the queen. And the thing that it is important, especially for people kind of on the left like me, to realize not all Republicans are all going along with this. There's a bunch of elected Republican representatives that are from the old school and do not want to participate in just a mad mob doing terrible things. And quite a few of these governors have blocked it. And people like Raffensperger would not let Trump just lie about the election and just take the presidency without winning it properly. And, what's going on now is a purge inside the Republican Party, removing all the serious people and replacing them all with people in this paranoid wing. But it hasn't completed yet. And so from their point of view, they have a bunch of rhinos blocking their glorious revolution to turn America into Gilead. Anyway, it is proceeding, and we'll hear quite a bit more about the world side of this from Alan later. But anyway, then Kaitlyn has got a congressional act.
I do. So making chips is hard and expensive. And right now, most chip production is done either in Taiwan or China. And that presents the United States with a bit of a conundrum.
It's the pollution, right?
Well, there's pollution.
Yeah.
Are you talking about why we do it overseas?
Yes, because the water pollution is awful. Silicon Valley is a Superfund site.
Right. So there's water pollution and pollutants and all that kind of stuff you have to deal with. There's also, of course, labor and all that stuff. And let's not pretend like we're not exploiting overseas workers by moving our plants overseas. But of course, this, makes China and other foreign nations capable of modifying or tampering with some of our hardware.
Oh, yes, hardware Trojans.
Yes, so we have a vested interest to keep some of these plants open in the United States. So the Biden administration wants a $52 billion program called CHIPS, CHIPS, to be passed. And that's exactly what CHIPS is going to do. It's going to fund basically a giant jobs program to build chips in the United States. So Sam, some of your students looking for future jobs could go into semiconductor manufacturing.
Well, yeah, but logically they would be the electrical engineering students. They aren't going to, unless they're going to have some other teachers. I don't know anything about hardware, but anyway, go ahead.
But well, I mean, there's software, there's firmware and stuff installed too. And I would assume any of your advanced students would know how to, design a transistor. I mean, they
sure wouldn't learn it from me, but anyway, it's a good skill to have.
Yep. So, yep.
Good. So we are going to manufacture more chips here if this goes through, right?
And it looks like it probably will.
I think everybody on both the right and the left right now would agree that we want to be independent from other nations on matters like the supply chain and energy. I think that's a winner right now.
It is a winner. I never thought, there are a few things like I thought would be just insurmountable. One, was getting the left and right to agree on clean energy. And there's still some pushback on the right.
Oh yeah, I don't think they agree it should be clean, but I think they agree it should be domestic.
Right. But both sides agree we need to be domestic, and green energy is the way to go. And also,
well, the first of those, but not the second. Yes.
Right. Well, the thing is that the cost of green energy has plummeted so much that even a lot of staunch conservatives who are just, they want the money, are pushing green energy. So.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of our current legislators are completely bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry. So that's why, for example, when the Texas power grid failed, they falsely blamed that on the wind and solar when that was not the problem, because it's not that they want to get the cheapest energy. They are, they've been bribed by certain corporate interests.
Right. And that is something that, like I said, that's why I thought this would never pass. I never thought that America would come to its, would the left and right would agree on certain things like clean energy, or like these jobs programs for chips. It's like, but there are certain things, we can all we can all reach across the aisle, come together and be like, okay, we need to secure America. We need to make sure that our chips aren't being Trojans.
Well, that's the old-fashioned politics that works, but it only works when one side isn't deciding that you are a bunch of Satan-worshiping pedophiles killing our kids and drinking their blood. That's why, that's politics the way it ought to work.
All right, just to be clear, I'm obviously I disagree. I hate pedophiles are the worst, and I don't drink blood.
Well, yes, I know, but I mean that's functional politics you're describing there, and we do have some of that still happening here.
Satanism is kind of cool, but I admit a little bit of Satanism, but the rest, that's way over the top.
Well, yes, I also agree. Satanism gets bad press. Satanism is not what people think it is. Anyway, so on that cheerful thought, let's talk about autocracies. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, yes, it's such a huge topic. And, thinking back to the 1990s with the fall of the Soviet Union and the triumphant proclamations of a new world order, the end of history, et cetera, it really seems like past few years, and especially the past month with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, has refocused attention on how perhaps the world isn't quite such a safe place, and perhaps it's not so democratic after all. And in fact, history is very much ongoing. And if anything, we are witnessing a new backsliding into a more autocratic world. Autocratic in this context, meaning governments that are focused on a single leader and are not democratic. Even if they have elections, which Russia does, they are not really functional democracies. Anyway, there's an organization or an institute, research institute at the university, headquartered at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, called VDEM, or Varieties of Democracy Project. And it has for some years now been trying to quantify the level of democracy in all of the world's countries. And it's a very complex process. Apparently, they draw on thousands of contributors, many of whom live in, or some of whom live in the countries, others who are specialists on particular countries that are included in this report. And they attempt to quantify literally hundreds of different metrics to establish how democratic or undemocratic different countries are.
I take a look and notice that at the top of the list is Sweden. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, which is rather convenient for their location.
Yeah.
But the major finding here in this report is that in the past 10 years, or even in the past 1 year for that matter, there's been a significant regression, that countries had been moving in a more democratic direction for a time, and now we're starting to see a real pullback from that and a real increase in autocracy, at least according to their measures. And of course, this applies to Russia, but it also applies to a bunch of other countries too. like the United States and Hungary, which just held its presidential election, in which Viktor Orban, it's very, I guess we could call him a reactionary political figure who's very much a fan of Vladimir Putin and who is probably Europe's staunchest supporter of Vladimir Putin.
And worshipped by the right in America. Tucker Carlson went there, and CPAC is going there.
Yes, exactly. So even though it's not really a very prominent country in the minds of most Americans, it's a really big deal to some Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Hungary has seen a lot of erosions in its freedoms in the past decade. And even the United States is seeing a major erosion in its freedoms. The United States is still in the top 20% of the rankings, according to VDEM, but it's significantly behind a number of other countries that are doing much better. All in all, it's a rather bleak situation.
They say democracy actually peaked in 2012, and now we've rolled back to like the 80s.
That's right. Yeah. And they say that the number of liberal democracies has gone down.
What's a liberal? What's the difference between liberal democracy and some other kind?
Well, this is where things get a little bit more complicated, because VDEM Institutes developed its own set of what they call high-level principles of political ideology. This is not exclusive to VDEM, but this is how they apply it. And so, reading from Wikipedia here, liberal democracy is the combination of a liberal political ideology that operates under an indirect democratic form of government. It's characterized by elections between multiple distinct political parties, a separation of powers into different branches of government, the rule of law in everyday life as part of an open society, a market economy with private property, and the equal protection of human rights, civil liberties, and political freedoms for all people.
Wow, I don't know if anybody could actually live up to that. We certainly don't.
Yeah, right. I know it's perhaps a bit of a stretch for a lot of people. And, for that matter, a lot of people would question whether this is a good thing to have all these things.
Well, I think that's the point. I mean, I think that's the point of the right in America. They really don't want democracy. And you'll see it on Twitter. You say we're a democracy. They say, no, we're a republic. We don't actually want to be a democracy.
Yes, and we saw a lot of that talk about a year ago from some Republican lawmakers, is that we're not really a democracy. We are a republic.
That is the question. That's why, I like AOC's answer. Well, maybe we should be. Some of us would like to be a democracy, but other people really don't want that.
Apparently not. And as it turns out, a lot of people around the world don't really value these things either. Or they do value them, but they are unable to affect that change in their governments because of the extreme autocracy in those governments.
So technically Russia would be a democracy, but not a liberal democracy, right?
Well, yeah, it's nominally a democracy because they do hold elections.
But they do things like jail the rival candidates and stuff. So it's like not a very fair election.
Not at all a fair election. It's a totally rigged election.
Yeah.
And you can say that of so many so-called democracies around the world, is that the leadership has managed to either jail the opposition, or they've changed the constitution of the country so much, or the electoral procedures so much that it's impossible for the opposition to gain control.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, it's a very interesting report, very detailed.
Yes.
And along with other reports I've heard, which say, America fell a lot during the Trump years. I mean, they said we lost on another scale. I heard we lost a lot when the Trump administration officials ignored congressional subpoenas. And they said, therefore, we no longer have oversight over the executive branch.
Right. And as I understand it, they've now recommended that those Trump officials be prosecuted.
And it seems increasingly clear that is not going to happen.
For whatever reasons, the Attorney General is not very interested in actually enforcing the law as it pertains to governance
and the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is becoming extremely clear they don't really care about the law either. No. So I think the extent to which the legal system represents oversight over the executive branch is greatly decreased.
Yeah, which is such an interesting contrast to what Republicans were accusing the Obama administration of several years ago. Once the Democrats lost control of the House and Senate, then the Obama administration was forced to create a bunch of executive orders in order to get anything done. And there's a lot of belly aching about the overstepping of the executive branch. But now I guess that's just not a relevant argument.
Well, it's all about power by any means
It
possible
is.
and no
It is.
principles. Actually, I have a question. Do these guys have any explanation for why the whole world is turning against democracy? What big force is making this happen?
I haven't read the whole report,
Mhm.
but I don't see anything, at least in the summary.
That's the hard question.
It really is. It really is. It's not just that certain countries have fallen sway under repressive governments and the military has executed a coup. Oftentimes, we're talking about countries that have well-established democracies, and
Like
the
the
people,
US.
like the U.S.
That's what amazed me. The Republicans were so mad they put in Trump, and I'm thinking, what are you all so mad about? It doesn't seem to me like anything is terribly wrong in the US.
Well, right, but another great example is France, which is on the verge of electing a extremely hard right character, Marine Le Pen,
Yeah.
who just a few years ago was considered the fringiest of right-wing fringe figures. But now she's polling just about even with Macron. And the election's in another week or something like that.
Yeah, so she would be their Trump, basically.
She would, yes.
And that's
Her
why,
father,
yeah.
she comes from a political family that's really been pushing this really extreme reactionary French politics for 2 generations now. And so people know exactly what they're getting in voting for her.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why.
And they're voting for her.
Yeah.
They're or on the verge of voting for her.
And it's all over the world. That's why I think one mistake one could make is like just to blame Trump and say if you got rid of Trump, it would all be gone. But he's an effect, not a cause.
Yes.
There's this wave of pressure. One hypothesis I wonder about if it's just the exhaustion of natural resources. We built these economies that are based on constant growth. We've hit the ceiling, and now suddenly we can't continue to grow this fast. And therefore everybody feels sort of impoverished and abused. And they're like trying to close ranks and declare an us versus them and drive the them away.
Yes, and I do think there is a real psychological component to this. And in our podcast on Tuesday, I have an interesting survey that I think will shed some light on the psychological aspects of support for reactionary political candidates.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm glad to have that report. It's a good one. And so I've got a couple more things. China has made their digital currency, the central bank digital currency, and they've incorporated it into WeChat and put it in a limited test mode in China, reaching 80 million people now. So I think they're the first major country to develop their own digital currency and distribute it. And WeChat is how people pay for everything. So that will reach 1 billion users soon. There was a lot of talk about these central bank digital currencies. The United States has begun looking into it, but they haven't developed one yet. And I also got this article from Google that I thought was interesting. Google is trying to clean up the Play Store, which it certainly needs. And now they're going to force Play Store apps to target recent versions of Android, not old versions. And if they don't get updated in 2 years, they're going to be moved to the bottom of the pile where people won't see them anymore, which will help prevent people from getting really old neglected apps, which, I did a bunch of security audits, and of course the apps that have been ignored for years tend to be the worst. So anyway, that might clean up the Play Store some, and that would be good. Anyway, and Kaitlyn has got Dolly.
I do have Dolly.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry about the delay there. I lost my mute button. Anyway, so let's see if I can find the original article. Right, so it's by the New York Times. And let's see who's it by. It's by Cade Metz. So good old Cade. So what's going on? So there's a new AI called Dolly. DALL-E. So this is sort of a Wally reference and a Salvador Dolly reference.
Oh,
And what it does is you give it some text. Like in the article, they specifically talk about a teacup in the shape of an avocado. And the AI will then generate those images. Sometimes it looks photoshopped, sometimes it looks hand-drawn. The AI is a little bit random like that. But it will generate these images for the user just based on some text input. And so another example they have in the New York Times article are two cats playing chess. And it has this nice little Photoshop of two cats playing chess. And they have a website that you can go to. Like, this is a big project, so it has its own website. It's sort of like one of those hacks that have its own logo. You know, this is a good paper when it has its own website.
yeah.
So you can go to the Dolly website. It's openai.com/blog/Dolly. And they have some more examples. Like they have one of the text prompt is an illustration of a baby dandelion. Oh, sorry.
Here, why don't you share your screen? Let's see a few of these.
Okay.
These are fun.
Share. Participants, chat, record, reaction, apps, view, video.
Some people have complicated computers.
Where did share? Oh, share screen. There it is. Right in the center, of course.
Aha.
Sorry about the
Yeah,
brain fart. There we go. So here's one. We have an illustration of a baby dandelion. Sorry, a baby daikon radish in a tutu walking a dog.
Well, yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah, and the AI just do this by itself. And then of course there's the armchair avocado that we saw. Apparently the AI likes avocados, so a lot of these demonstrations have to do with avocados. They have a storefront that has the word OpenAI on it, and and these look like real photoshopped images.
Yeah.
And they have the exact same cat on top with a sketch on the bottom. So they have a cat on the top, and then the AI just do a sketch of the cat on the bottom.
That's very impressive.
It is very impressive. Now, what's interesting is that there's also political ramifications of this kind of technology. Oh, and actually, while I'm sharing my screen, I'll show that they do have a GitHub page, OpenAI Dolly. You can download, it's Python. You can download. Unfortunately, the usage is a little complicated, but the training models are all there. So if you go to the usage, you'll see that they actually want you to write some Python code in order to use this project. And there's no easy way to just go to a website right now and use it. But if you do want to play with it, the source code is available. So of course, there's some political ramifications of this kind of technology. For misinformation campaigns, you can create new images on the fly directed towards specific users, just automatically. And so, we're worried about things like deepfakes.
Yep.
There's also these sort of AI generated images. So you could have one of, Vladimir Putin could have multiple images, like spit out 10,000 images a day of Russians helping the Ukrainians.
Yep.
And just send that all over the media, and it'll be gish galloping, fake images. So a gish gallop, for people that don't know, is a term used to describe someone who sends out so much BS that you can't possibly debunk it all, right? You just keep sending out so many lies. Like if I were to say the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and I think Gish is a young Earth creationist, so this makes sense. If I said the Earth is 6,000 years old, and we know it because the dinosaurs are still alive, and we know that the dinosaurs are still alive because we see them every day, just debunking one of those claims might take, like 10 minutes. I was like, we do not see dinosaurs every day.
But we get popular on YouTube. Here,
right.
Why don't you stop sharing?
Oh, will do.
If we get popular on, that's great. We'd be popular on YouTube if you had those kind of things.
Right. But anyway, so that's what a gish gallop is. And yeah, political ramifications abound. There we go. Stop sharing. I know how to use a computer.
Now I can see you. Yeah. All right, good. Yeah. And okay, so then Alan has got the Viasat incident, or the Viasat.
Yeah, the Viasat, which we talked about a few weeks ago. And
this killed the internet in Ukraine, right?
Pardon?
This was to kill the internet in Ukraine, right?
Yes, well, not all of the internet, but specifically the internet that might have been used in weapon systems and government communications in Ukraine. And reverse mode, also known as Ruben Santa Marta, has a blog in which he's been updating his research into Viasat and the Viasat attack. And he's come out with some interesting stuff more recently. He apparently got his hands on both a bricked, compromised Viasat modem and a known good modem. And he was able to dump the flash memory and compare them, which unfortunately he is not sharing publicly, but he did post a few screenshots, and it's very clear that the attacked modem, well, that code is very clearly garbage. So it's understandable why it's bricked, because that flash memory is just totally nonsense. The
So
content.
it's just, they just overwrote it with random
They
characters
just
or something?
overwrote it. Yeah, maybe there's something functional in there, but they basically just overwrote it with characters.
It was just to make the modem stop working, right?
That's right. Yeah. And that's good enough, because most people do not have the ability to reflash that. It
Now,
can be
this was
done,
just,
but
this was described as a satellite hack. They didn't actually hack the satellites, did they?
well, there's more to it. And Santa Marta goes into some details, speculating about possible lines of attack. And what he's proposing here is that the attack happened via a management protocol.
Right.
And a protocol called TR-069, which is a rather obscure one. That's not a, you won't see it in any RFC. It's from the Broadband Developer Group. This is the consortium of companies that produce broadband modems. And it is similar in functionality to SNMP.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of these modems, SurfBeam 2 modems that are used by Viasat, apparently they have TR-06, are using TR-069 for their updates, and they don't use good cryptographic validation of the code.
Right.
So it is possible for someone to force all these modems to accept bad code that's not signed by Viasat, and then bad things happen after that.
Yep.
And although Viasat hasn't come entirely clean on what exactly happened, how they got attacked, it appears to be something along the lines of what was it? The attacker exploited a misconfiguration in a VPN appliance, and then gained remote access to the trusted management segment of the KA-SAT network.
Yep.
Which is about as vague as you can get, but
No, it sounds basically like an unsecured API.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And probably not terribly sophisticated either, and I'm sure it took some effort, but we're not, and yes, we're talking about nation state actors here.
Yep.
But it also sounds like their network didn't have the best security to begin with, as evidenced by the lack of really proper signature validation on all of their modems.
Yeah, but these customer premises equipment are usually pretty insecure because they mass produce them and try to make them cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All right. And all right, then we're back to me. So Facebook tried to make digital cryptocurrency, called Libra, and the whole world rebelled and they were unable to do it. So now they're going back to something they already tried a few years ago and failed at. They're going to make Zuckbucks, which is going to be coins they sell inside their Facebook apps, inside their Meta apps. And of course, this will tie into Zuckerberg's ideas about the Metaverse, where you will pay for these Zuckbucks and then you can buy products and all the various applications that will work together in the Metaverse. It sounds pretty bogus. Of course, all this Metaverse stuff sounds pretty bogus. I think everybody is sort of horrified. Zuck had this demonstration of him like playing chess or something at a table in the metaverse. And everyone's like, why would you have to go to the metaverse to do that? And I was horrified. Like a few weeks ago, they went to a major technology showcase and they demonstrated the metaverse by having a virtual reality thing where you survived the 9/11 attacks where the buildings are being bombed and falling down around you. And like, who would want to do that? Are you out of your mind? So I think this is going to be like the Apple Lisa for Facebook. This is the founder moving the whole company in a disastrous direction that is going to fail miserably. But you can't get rid of him, unlike Steve Jobs, because of the dual share class holder issue. So
Sounds like you don't have faith in the metaverse.
I don't have faith in the thing that Zuckerberg's creating. I think that the internet as a whole is certainly creating virtual experiences like what we're doing right now, which are very popular, make it possible to work from home and stuff. But yeah, Zuckerberg's metaverse seems like a disaster.
It seems like you just need more faith.
That's one option. Yes, I could develop more faith, or I could just charge ahead with cruel cynicism. I think I'm choosing the second one for right now. Anyway, he's going to have Zuckbucks. And let's go on to Kaitlyn, who has found the benefits of exercise.
Right, as if you needed more reasons to go out and exercise.
Some people seem to need more reasons to go out and exercise.
Well, apparently. Newcastle University have published a thing, and I don't know, I published a press announcement talking about how exercise reduces your bowel cancer risk. Say that 5 times fast. Bowel cancer risk, bowel cancer risk, bowel cancer risk. Yes,
Cancer,
anyway.
That's what you're supposed to get those scope tests, right? To test. So bowel cancer is actually a pretty big issue if you're over.
It is a big issue.
Yeah.
And they've known for a while that exercise helps, but they didn't know why. But recently, scientists at Newcastle have figured out that it has to do with the protein, and I'm going to mess up this name so badly, interleukin 6 or IL-6. I don't know what interleukin 6 is.
Well, I've heard it a lot. I never knew what it was though.
Okay, but it's apparently it fights cancer and it gets released when you exercise.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. And it repairs like your DNA and it stops the cancer from spreading and stuff like that. So yeah, if you are worried about cancer, one of the best things you can do is get some exercise.
Yeah. And the other thing I can tell you, if you pass 50, your doctor will tell you got to get colonoscopies and stuff. They're quite concerned about this. Well, good. I'm all for exercise. Anyway, then Alan has got, the COVID AI tools.
Yes. Kaitlyn was just talking about some of the great successes in AI, and I have to say, that's really impressive stuff.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, AI is not good for everything, and it's definitely not good for diagnosing people with COVID-19. There is this article in the MIT Technology Review reviewing a couple of very large studies that were conducted in the past year. One of them looked at 232 algorithms for diagnosing patients or predicting how sick they would become.
Is it hard to diagnose COVID? I thought there was just like a blood test.
Well, now there is, yes. Yes, or a throat swab or nasal swab, and those are indeed pretty effective. PCR test is very good. But earlier on, remember that one of the only ways available to diagnose COVID was through a scan of the chest, of the lungs.
Right.
And so this would seem to be an excellent situation in which to apply AI, because all you need to do is feed the X-ray of the lungs into this product, and there are products, and it will just spit out a yes or no answer. This person does have COVID or this person does not have COVID.
Right.
Or in other cases, these algorithms were being used to determine whether somebody was at high risk for hospitalization or death or relatively low risk, and then treat them accordingly.
This was the big thing in South Korea, right? They would give you a lung X-ray, and then they would look at the lung X-ray for the pattern of crystals that indicated you had COVID.
I don't know about South Korea,
Okay.
But I think all over the world for a while, this was really the only widespread, widely available technology that could be used to diagnose COVID. I think by a few months into it, then finally more diagnostic tests were available. But yes, in the early days, it was a big problem. Anyway, these two studies found that the algorithms were by and large garbage, and that possibly didn't help anybody, and if anything did harm to a lot of patients, because they either misdiagnosed or they failed to identify people who were indeed at high risk. And some of the reasons speculated as to why this was the case is that the data sets were no good. Among the problems with the data sets were that the sample images were being reused both in the training set and the testing set, which is equivalent to giving the AI the answer to the test
Yeah.
in advance. Other issues included that you had hundreds and hundreds of different teams of researchers, both academic and commercial, that were not collaborating and were basically duplicating their efforts, so that you had like 400 different solutions, and all of them were very similar and all of them were wrong. If only they had bothered to collaborate, then maybe there would actually be some useful AI at this point.
Yeah.
Another problem is that some of the hospitals that purchased this technology from various private companies were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. So these were very restrictive NDAs that basically prevent them from even talking about having the technology and certainly identifying the company that's providing it.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just shady top to bottom. And unfortunately, I think it turned into a money grab on the part of some of these companies with very, very real health consequences. But we may never know exactly how much damage was done and to whom.
Yeah.
Anyway, this certainly does not preclude the possibility of AI being useful in diagnosing medical conditions in the future, and COVID included. It's just that this is an excellent case study of how things can go terribly wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think AI is mostly just a buzzword to sell snake oil right now, but it'll eventually be very valuable. But I think most people are just exaggerating its benefits.
Yes, emphasis on eventually.
Yeah. All right. And I've got some stories about El Salvador that were pretty interesting. I mean, they had a 62 killings on March 26. So the president of El Salvador declared a state of emergency and suspended constitutional rights, including the presumption of innocence, jailed thousands of people without bothering with trials or anything, and then said that because the gangs are still misbehaving, he's going to put them all in solitary confinement, and then said he's going to stop giving all the prisoners food to punish the gangs who continue to be violent. So this is reminding me of Duterte in the Philippines. And anyway, so as they're having this enormous crisis over gang violence, they've also switched to Bitcoin as the official currency, which they touted as something that was going to solve all their problems. But unfortunately, after he declared that, the price of Bitcoin went down and it never really came up again yet. So it turned out there's an article here from Bloomberg of Michael McDonald, who went to El Salvador and tried to buy everything with Bitcoin. And he found that almost everybody doesn't use Bitcoin. The equipment doesn't work. The transactions take a whole day and then they fail. Everybody just wants you to pay with cash. There's a few people that use Bitcoin and are enthusiastic about it, but most people find it's just a complete boondoggle. And it has not solved the problems in El Salvador. And this is something that I wondered from the beginning. For several years, people have been trying to get me involved in these cryptocurrency things, and they're all the same. They involve moving to some distant war-torn nation without a functional government because there won't be any taxes, and claiming they're going to make some crypto utopia there because the government won't interfere with them. And I always ask inconvenient questions like, do they have roads? Do they have airplanes? Do they have cops? They say, oh, we don't need any of that. We'll have Bitcoin. I'm saying, I think you need all that. I think Bitcoin doesn't replace your need for a functioning government. And we're watching it happen in El Salvador. Anyway, it's nice to be in America. Even with all our flaws, it's still pretty nice here.
I'll just point out that
Yeah.
prior to this, these recent developments, according to VDEM, El Salvador is in the bottom 30% or so of the world's countries, one step below Iraq.
Well, yeah, and that's an issue I hadn't even thought of, which is, did this guy even get fairly elected?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, even aside from how he got into power, now that he's in power, he's doing stuff that seems to indicate an extremely troubled country.
Yes, and I'm sure after these developments, El Salvador's ranking will fall a lot further.
Yeah, and by the way, where are the Philippines on that VDEM chart?
Let me take a look here.
Because Duterte seems to be pretty much just a crazed dictator.
Yeah. It's actually a number of steps above El Salvador. It's in the
Yeah.
bottom about 40%.
Yeah. Well, so maybe they have something resembling an election. That's why, I mean, I wasn't even sure that the El Salvador president was unfairly elected. He might be the best of a bad lot.
Well, El Salvador has fallen a lot, apparently, in the past few years. It used to be ranked much higher.
Yeah. Well, one
So
way
it
to
seems to
interpret
be a
it.
deteriorating situation.
Yeah. Well, one way to interpret this might be that democracy is a luxury product only available to rich people who are content and willing to share some of their wealth. And when people are poor and desperate, they no longer care about democracy. They just want anybody that will improve their life a little bit.
I'd say the one outlier to that is China, which according to VDEM is in the bottom 10%. It's actually almost at the bottom.
Absolutely. But they're also, yeah.
But it's seen just an incredible growth in the middle class and prosperity. So,
well, yeah. And yes, I mean, they've been effective. Yes. Yeah. I think that's why their government is popular, because they are in fact delivering for the people. The people are seeing their standard of living go up.
yeah, and it's widely said that that was the bargain that the government made after Tiananmen Square, is that rather than giving people political freedom, they would be giving people more economic freedom and prosperity.
I think that's what people really want. I think we've seen it in America too. Most people think democracy is some kind of abstract nonsense, and what they really care about is the price of gas and their paycheck.
Yeah, you see this in countries all over the world, that people are driven to vote based on their perception of the economy and the economic performance of their government.
Yeah, I can't fault that. That's logical. I mean, what really matters is, can you live your life? Who really cares what name they put on the government?
Yes.
I mean, the only reason why I prefer democracy is I think it will lead to a better life for the people, but maybe that's not true. Maybe that's why people are turning against it.
I mean, the nice thing about democracy is that if somebody really bad comes in, it gives an option to get them out and cycle people through.
Well, that's the peaceful transfer of power, which we don't have anymore here, but it seemed to be a good idea. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, that's it for this one. We'll be back on Tuesday, and we're going to go out on the weekend and engage in that healthful exercise, I think. Farewell. Oops, not that button. There's the button.